All right, here we are, November 1st, 2023. Our war on Gaza is continuing, and as we get further in, I get more and more questions. Why Gaza? Who cares about Gaza? And people don't seem to know that we've had a Jewish presence in Gaza, and not something that just started yesterday or the day before, or with Gush Katif, and then they left in 2005, but we've had a very, very long presence in Gaza. First and foremost, we go back to the Nevi'im. We all know of Shimshon, and all of Shimshon's adventures, if you will, were with the Pilishtim in Gaza. So already going back to that time, we know of the Jewish presence there. We know the Jewish settlements. We know later on in the days of Mishnah, we know about Gaza. We know, and Gaza comes up time and time again. And basically, the Crusades more or less wiped out Jewish settlements there. With the expulsion from Spain and Portugal, 1492, 1497, and then the Ottoman conquering of Israel about 1517, that basically brought new interest and new life into the Sephardim that left Spain, because the Ottoman Empire was very good to them in general, and they wanted to be in Israel, and they were allowed to live there. They had some sort of rights over there, much better than what was going on when they left Spain. And they started resettling all different places. And one of the places they resettled was Gaza. So at least from that time period, 1500, 1520, we had a regular presence in Gaza, and it lasted until the days of Napoleon. Napoleon came along. He basically destroyed Gaza. He massacred people, threw people out, changed things again. And once he left, people went back. And there was a steady presence on and off, if you will, in Gaza until 1929. So let's try to talk about some of this presence, some of the characters, all right, or rather the personalities, and see what went on. If we could piece together a little bit of what was going on, who these players were, who the important Hachamim or individuals were. I will throw in from now, because I don't know if we're going to get to it later on or not, somebody that you would never imagine was one of the most influential people in re-establishing Gaza around 1870, 1880. Anybody know? No. When you think of Israeli tea, what do you think of? Wysotsky, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
So Wysotsky himself,
He
was originally from Russia, and he made Aliyah, and he saw we need to resettle different places. And the three places he wanted to really have resettled were Lod, Shechem, and Gaza. So, and Gaza, from the three places, Gaza was his best, resettlement and best, group of people that he was able to get and strengthen that city and rebuild business over there. That was it. I found that to be very interesting when I was doing some research.
I have a question.
Please.
Did we ever rule Gaza in the biblical time period? Because it sounds like it was always almost not part of the kingdom.
So you are right. We almost never had full reign on Gaza. Gaza was always a very difficult place, and the Pilishtim were there. Okay, and obviously the Pilishtim are not the Palestinians, even though the name Palestine, was created through that name Pilishtim. But the Pilishtim were always there. They were always a thorn in our side. and we always had great difficulties with them in the entire Gaza region. So yes, I don't think we ever had full reign over that strip. Regardless, it's ours. According to what the Tanakh tells us, according to the Berit that Borei Olam made with Abraham Avinu that we just read about in this past week's parasha, and anything that we've read further on and will read in the Nevi'im, it's all part of Eretz Yisrael that we're supposed to have. So that we have these, I don't know what I'm going to call them, characters, savages there currently, and they're whatever. I don't want to talk about it. It's very, very painful to think about the things that they do. We answered that, Jason? We're good?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. So, what are we going to talk about, Gaza? Let's just try to look at some particular Hachamim, and then we'll try to look at a teshoubah and get a different idea of how the Hakamim viewed Gaza. Not yet. There's no source yet. We'll get to the source. I have it. I'll send it to you. So as we said, there was Jewish settlement beforehand. It basically dwindled, really resurfaced at the time of the Ottomans. So prior to the Ottomans, okay, which was towards the end of the time of the Crusades, when they were basically their strength and their power over the region was lapsing, we had Ibn Obadiah Bertanura, and he was traveling, and we know his travel logs, he tells us about every place that he went. And he went to Gaza in 1488. And there was a Jewish settlement. It was small, but it was enough that there was a small community over there, and he spent time over there for a week or so while he was traveling, and he was invited to different people's homes. You know, both Ashkenazim and Sephardim were living in Gaza at the time. Later on, we see that in Gaza, again, prior to the Ottoman period, there was about 70 Jewish families living in Gaza. As far as Beit Din, they had Beit Din in Gaza itself. Okay, they didn't have to go outside to get rulings. And you have Rabbi Yaaqob Berab. Rabbi Yaaqob Berab, what you call it, was basically one of the rabbis, if you will, that predated Maran, okay, and all his schooling. So he also tells us about there was Hachamim and Beit Din and everything going on in Gaza. He was very famous, yeah. He passed away in 1541.
He was the one who wanted to give Maran.
Yes, he's the one that reestablished the Simhah. Okay. Radbaz, that we know about, obviously, he one of the exiles from Spain, and then ended up moving and becoming chief rabbi in Egypt, and became rabbi in one of the rabbis in Safed over there. He was thrown questions numerous times because there was a community living, but at that time there was no Beit Din and there was no chief rabbi there. As far as getting different witnesses and testimonies, sometimes he says we had, sometimes we didn't have. So it was a scanty, startup over there. What did exist in Gaza that people think didn't exist, that felt that the Jews were only involved in commerce, they were actually involved back then in agriculture. Okay, and they tell you, oh no, we're coming, with the different famous first Aliyah, second Aliyah, and third Aliyah from, let's say, 1880 on, that we're coming to start agriculture because the Jews don't do agriculture. The Jews are doing agriculture. Okay, and we have obviously sources that point to it. Here's an interesting one. Minhagim, Minhag Gaza. Okay, we hear about Minhag Halab, Minhag Misrai, Minhag Lebanon, Minhag Iraq. We ever hear of Minhag Gaza?
No.
No, really, you ever hear? So Rabbi Levi ben Habib, okay, he was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. He was basically the opponent of Mahari Berab. Mahari Berab established this Simhah outside of Yerushalayim. Rabbi Levi ben Habib was the rabbi of Yerushalayim and said, how dare you establish Simhah outside of Yerushalayim? I'm here, I'm Yerushalayim. I'm establishing it, not you, and since you establish it, I'm not going to establish it, and, we're going to make it null and void. And that's why the whole thing died out, because there was a big fight between them. Regardless, he wrote about a question that came to him about reading the Sefer Torah on Hol HaMoed Sukkot specifically, right? In Sukkot, you have B'Yom HaRishon, B'Yom HaShini, B'Yom HaShini, B'Yom HaShalishi, B'Yom HaShalishi, B'Yom HaRevi'i, right? Each day, you're really reading from two different days' readings, if you think about it. When we get a mahzor, or we know what we're talking about. Okay. So he goes back and forth, and he said, you know what? I see this minhag in Yerushalayim, but I see in Gaza they're doing something different. Minhag of Gaza happens to be more in sync with what we do. Okay? Read the first days, and then you read the next day, then you go back and read the 2 days, and you read back the first day, So he talks about that, and he talks about, why this minhag exists, how it was established in Gaza, and how minhag Yerushalayim is different. He preferred the Yerushalayim minhag, obviously, and the point is that there was something going on. They obviously had an established minhag that the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim had to make himself aware of. That means they had some sort of more than a settlement. We talk about Purim all the time. Purim, do we have 1 day Purim, 2 day Purim? Do we do the 14th of Adar or do we do the 15th of Adar? So what did they do in Gaza? Did they do the first day or the second day? Was it a city that's considered a walled city or not? So there's an interesting book called Tikkun Yisachar. This Moroccan rabbi, Rabbi Mordechai ben Susan, who already left Morocco and made Aliyah by 1500. And he records different minhagim of from different cities. And then later on in the book, he talks about what goes on in the various cities in Eretz Israel for Purim. And he writes, what did they do in Gaza? והמקומות שקוראים בהם המגילה שני ימים, מפני שספק אם עיירות הם, אם כרכים הם, כמו שכתבתי למעלה בביאור הקיביעות בחודש אדר, הסדר להם בקריאת התורה ביום השני כסדר יום ראשון. Because those places that follow the second day, they read the Torah both days. And that was the minhag in most of the Mustalabi communities. Okay? And we even heard that this is what they do in Gaza. So Gaza was considered as a place that had an old Mustalabi community, in other words, a community that predated the days of the Spanish exiles. And they followed that tradition over there. Then you have another thing about a guy was living in Gaza, making his money in Gaza. Okay, so if you made money in a community, you were expected to pay taxes to the community because the community needed, they needed funds to exist. But at the same time, he made his money in Gaza, but he lived in Hebron. So he decided, no, I'm paying taxes in Hebron. I don't care about Gaza. They took him to Beit Din. The community took him to Beit Din, but you can't do that. And it became a big fight. So they went to Rabbi Simhah Ashkenazi. Rabbi Simhah Ashkenazi was the Shita Mikubesa. He was one of the teachers of the Ari. Okay, and to figure out the din. You're stealing from the community. You're working in their midst. You're making money off of them. They're living there. You're taking the money that you're making off of them to go someplace else. You can't do that. You have to pay full taxes in Gaza where you make all your money. They need the money over there. So it was a regular working community, and we have more and more different cases like this. All things that go on over the course of time. So let's jump forward. There was a very, very famous poet, Rabbi Yisrael Najara. Rabbi Yisrael Najara was originally from Safed, and from Safed he moved to Damascus, and from Damascus he moved back. He ended up coming back to Israel and moving to Gaza. Rabbi Israel Najjar, right? Good friend of yours, Ezra.
It's in the jars. We used to hang
Mhm.
out.
يا رب عالم بعالمي so many famous Pizmonim, old Pizmonim and Bakashot were all written by Rabbi Yisrael Najara. And they say that he had this holiness to him that even the Malachim used to come down on Leil Shabbat to listen to him. And where was he? He was in Gaza. He was one of the rabbis, one of the main rabbis in Gaza, and it wasn't just him. Then his son stayed there, and his grandson stayed there. So they had a family tradition of the Najara family living in Gaza. So we had obviously famous Hachamim. We have also infamous Hachamim. We had somebody called Natan HaAzati. Natan HaAzati was basically the right-hand man of Shabbatai Sevi. Okay, so all the Shabtaut, all the Sabbateanism basically developed and
Prophet?
Hmm?
That was prophet?
You want to call it a prophet? Was he was Mashiach? You want to call him a prophet? Call him a prophet. Basically, Natan Azati was his right hand man. He was his secretary. He was, he was the guy that made him his appointments. He was a troublemaker, according to a lot of sources. But Natan, known as Natan Ha'azati, from Aza. Okay, so obviously there was a lot of Shabtaut, okay, going in the entire Gaza region. And
Who wrote that book about Shaul at night?
No, Hamdat Yamim, there are many, many different opinions as to who wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
There is an opinion that he wrote it, but most sources point to so many others that most probably wrote it. I don't believe that he wrote it, based upon so many different styles of writing as well as other things. It doesn't seem like he was the author. There are people that want to pen it on him and and say, he was it, and that's why you can't use any of the prayers. But it really does not seem so. Okay, it's in fact, based upon more and more recent research, it seems that very credible Hachamim wrote it, and there was nothing wrong with it at all, and it was not connected to Shabtaut at all, whatsoever. Listen, take it for what it's worth. All our Hachamim, over the course of a couple of hundred years at least, they all embraced it. They would not only take the prayers from it, but they would actually take the teachings from the Hamdat Yamim and incorporate it. Yeah. Every Friday, you all say Yom Hashishi, right? That's from Hamdat Yamim. How many years goes? He goes, my personal custom, I like to say on Friday, Yom Hashishi. All of a sudden, everybody started doing it. That's just one of millions of things. Every page is things to do. The Hachamim would sit and read from the Hamdat Yamim all day on Shabbat and all day on holidays because it was considered very, very spiritual, holy reading. Whatever. So we got a basic idea that there were Hachamim in all these places. We've had classes in the past from Rabbi Nisim Ohana. Remember Nisim Ohana? How about you, Barry? Remember him? Ezra, remember him? Maybe I know you don't remember him. Rabbi Nisim Ohana. Nisim Ohana was born in Algiers. Made Aliyah at the age of 4 to Yerushalayim. And so obviously the bulk of his Torah he learned in Yerushalayim, from the Hachamim in Yerushalayim.
1 year.
I'll give you the exact year if you want in a second. That's really difficult. 1882 he was born. Okay, so he made Aliyah 1892. By 21, he was a full-fledged Hakham. And his first position was rabbi of Gaza. Okay, so Gaza was his place. He was the first. That was his first official position. He was there from about 1907 to about 1912. Okay, short position, but he did a lot there at the time. He helped to fix the situation with cemeteries and with mikvaot, which they had a lot of problems with prior to that. And funny enough,
there's cemeteries in Gaza?
well, there were, the Arabs already destroyed it. Even the what do you call it? Even the grave, the tombstone of Elyashar Elyashar existed there for close to 500 years until they totally got rid of it around the time of 1948. They totally eradicated everything. So there were some old timers that remembered more or less where it was, but there was no more sign of it. But imagine, so Elyashar Elyashar passed away what year? 1628 until 1948. So 300 years. It's 350 years. It was there. Gone. There were old, old synagogue structures and things like that. Also, all these things are all gone now. Okay, supposedly there are some old mosques that still have some Jewish writing on the walls from the outside. On the outside, going back a few hundred years.
We could send you there now if you want to go see.
Listen, we can tell the soldiers, take us pictures. Really, God bless those soldiers. Anyway, so this Rabbi Simhah was actually rabbi here in the community for a very short period, less than 2 years. 1912 to 1914 approximately. And then World War I was breaking out, and he went back.
Rabbi Lightning was right after him?
Yeah. Lightning came right after that. It doesn't seem like they crossed paths over here. I did a little more research on him this week. And he wasn't owned, even though if you're beginning of one of his books, he writes how he was hired by the Syrian community, and he writes both the Halabi and Shamis hired him together to teach. Okay, he was hired as a teacher, but he took a advertisement in the Ladino newspaper of New York in 1913, and he's basically, from what he writes over there, he was also connected to a few different Turkish and other groups, and he was actually staying at the home of a Spanioli guy on Allen Street. Puts the address and everything. It was a very interesting little piece. I got it through a research professor the other day. And basically, I'm available, to teach anything from basic Hebrew to Torah, Nebi'im, Ketuvim, Mishnah, Gemara, Zohar, and I perform weddings. So it was funny to see an advertisement from a Yerushalmi Hakham in New York in 1913.
Did he speak any other languages?
Well, he obviously knew Hebrew, Arabic, and Ladino. For sure, he knows those three for sure.
Is he in the Joey Sit films?
No, they don't know about him. No, they really don't know about him. Listen, he was technically hired by Agudat Ahim. Agudat Ahim was technically the forerunner of King's B'Tesh in a way. Okay? And there's no references to him at all, anyplace. I've had Eddie Ashkenazi searching for years already. Can't find anything about him anyplace. And even there's what they call the Central Sephardic Archives, that part of the Jewish archives in Manhattan. They don't have any reference of him. I remember I asked even Rabbi Angel about him if he ever came across anything. Never found anything on him. Like I said, he was here for a short period of time, and it's a long time ago. It's really early on if you think about it.
Yeah. Did you have the Ellis Island on him, or?
No. I never did Ellis Island on anybody, so I don't know. Go ahead, have fun. Oh, Hannah. Hmm? What's that?
He's Catholic, Mohammed.
Mm-hmm. Irish. All right. So an interesting thing I just came across maybe 2 hours ago. There was a rabbi from Hebron. Okay. I don't think I ever brought him up in any of our classes ever, but very, very interesting guy. Rabbi Haimis Hakarigal. I'm sure I never brought him up because we don't have any writings from him. But I've read on him many, many times. Anyway, Rabbi Haimis Hakarigal was from Hebron, and he made it here to the United States in 1773. Okay, you have to understand the Sephardim that the Jews that were here were Sephardim, and obviously they spoke Spanish. Okay, and the Hachamim from the Middle East, from Israel, spoke Spanish as well. And there were communities in the islands, Caribbean islands of Sephardim as well, and they also had to have Hachamim to lead them and to run things for them. They were smaller communities, but they were very wealthy communities, and they always had a lot of issues that would come up. Rabbi Karigal came to the United States, but his drive and his goal, his mission was to get, I think, to either Antigua or Anguilla and to be the rabbi there. That never ended up happening. He ended up getting to Barbados, and he was the rabbi there. And when I was there a few years ago, I went to his grave and everything. Yeah.
Oh, he died there.
He died there.
Got a picture.
I have a picture of him, yeah. I'll show you in a second. But anyway, Rabbi Karigal, when he was here in the United States, so they invited him Shabuot to the Touro synagogue in Newport, to speak and this and that. And obviously he gave a long speech, whatever this is. But the interesting thing is they introduced him to Ezra Stiles. Ezra Stiles was not Jewish, was a Protestant minister, and I don't know if he was a statesman or whatever he was. He was a well-known professor also. And Stiles fell in love with him, and he would constantly go to visit him while he was here in the United States, and they would have conversations, and Stiles would record everything they discussed. And Stiles had a lot of questions about the condition of the Jews in Eretz Israel. And so one of the things that Karigal told them, where the Jews are living, and this was obviously in 1773, yes, Jews live in Gaza, and there's a big synagogue there. That's one of the things that happened to come up. So we know there is that Jewish presence. David wants to see a picture. Let's get a picture for Stiles.
How long was this? Was it continuous?
Here is Behayim Ishaq Karigal. What continuous?
The community living in Gaza.
So the continuous community definitely seems to have gone from about 1520 all the way till about 1800. Okay, Napoleon came along and he decimated everything in Gaza, so everybody disappeared. Most people ended up moving from Gaza to Hebron. Some went other places, and then some people came back. There was, for example, the Castile family. Castile family, we know them. They come up. Their name comes up again and again in Hebron, but we don't find them in Hebron prior to about 1717. And based upon different manuscripts, it seems that they are one of the old original families from Gaza, and they're the ones that helped to reestablish it again. It's interesting.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
I thought Napoleon, generally speaking, was good for the Jews. He even tried to reestablish the Sanhedrin. What was the reasoning for destroying Gaza? Was it because there were a different main population there and the Jews just were kind of happened to be there, or is that part we don't know right now?
I personally don't know, but Gaza was a very important port city, okay? And the Ottoman forces obviously were there in Gaza, and they were not about to just leave it alone for Napoleon, the short little Frenchman, to come in and take over from them and take control. Because if you control a major port, you control everything. So he had no choice. He had to wage war on Gaza to destroy it so he could take over. That's what I know historically.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, but I'm sure you can look it up. I'm sure you'll find out, with a few clicks of a button, exactly what went on. Okay, but he was there in that region because I know he was also in Egypt. Let's say 1795 to 1805. That was, his stint in Israel and Egypt. So that would be the time period that we're talking about.
Thank you.
Okay. No problem. All right, I'm gonna send you guys a document now, and I will include Jason as well. Okay, and this is going to be a teshoubah that we're going to look at from the Rishon LeSiyon, the chief rabbi of Eretz Israel. Rabbi, who? Come on. You have it in front of you. Simhah LeIsh. Who's Simhah LeIsh? Yaaqob, Shaul, Elyashar. Okay, Rabbi Yaaqob, Shaul, Elyashar, we've read from his teshoubot in the past. He's written many, many books. And the reason we're going to read this one is strictly because he's talking about Gaza. Okay? Yeah, send a copy to, I don't have his number.
No, I'm trying.
Mark, Joey.
No,
Yeah.
no chat.
Okay. No, Joey's on the, I didn't send it to that chat.
Oh,
I sent it to, to the small chat. Okay. I'm going to start. נשאלתי לחוות דעתי הקצרה מאת הרב הגאון. Okay. Look, who's asking a question? Bottom left. Who's asking Rabbi Elyashar a question? Rabbi Shmuel Salant, big chief rabbi of Ashkenazim. Okay. אודות עיר עזה, כידוע לנו בבירור מפי הקבלה ומפי ספרים שעזה היה בה יישוב בני ישראל זמן רב וזה 60 שנה ואת היותרת שנבטל היישוב מסיבת הגלות המר ולא יכלו לסבול עם בני ישראל הגלות והכרחו לצאת משם. And there was a very, very long period of time of residence of Jews in Gaza, and now it's been 60 years because of decimation that they have not been able to live there. And so most of the expats from Gaza moved to Hebron. And they left the destroyed synagogue. ובית הקברות, מעין יושב, רק גויים וערלים דווקא בתולו. And they left the cemetery with nobody to tend to it, nobody to go there, except for ערלים, okay, and goyim. Goyim being Muslims and ערלים being Christians. והנה, מעיתם התעוררו אחינו בני ישראל, ספרדים ואשכנזים לקבוע דירה בעזה הנזכר. Now all of a sudden Jews want to go and live there again in Gaza. Probably Gaza City, but okay. ועשו בית להתפלל שם, וכבשו מניין 10 מישראל ביותר, והוליכו שם ספר תורה, מתפללים שם בעשרה, והגיע עתה חג הפסח הקדוש, ונסתפקו אם יעשו יום א' יום טוב לבד כבני ישראל, או יעשו בית ימים טובים של גלויות, כמנהג רוב העולם. So now, people moved to Gaza, and they weren't sure. What do we do in Gaza? Do we do 2 days of Yom Tov, or we do 1 day of Yom Tov?
Part of Israel.
Not part of Israel. What is it? It's this thing, it's this strip over there. And as Jason said in the beginning of the class, we never really had full control over it. It was never really ours. So is it part of Eretz Israel? And we haven't had Jewish presence. The Jewish presence has been, has been eradicated from there for these 60 years. And now they want to go there. So they started in Minyan. They 10 plus people. And they're using a house to pray in, and they have a Sefer Torah. But what do we do? 2 days or 1 day? So you would never think to ask such a question.
Yeah, it's part of Israel.
But to you, it's part of Israel. If you look, open up many books of the poskim. Even things that we consider Israel, even Hakham tells you have to do 2 days, because it's outside of the realm of where people live. So even though it's part of the land, but if the people aren't living there, it's not part of the land.
I think Afula is like for Maaser purposes and stuff like that is, I think in Harambam is like not part of Israel. I thought that was weird. And then and for people living in Syria, it seemed like it was a stronger. So I think that Rabbanan they had to give, but, whatever. Just
I don't know exact locations, but I know I've come across it. Okay. מעשו בפרק שם, כבסו מניין עשרה מישראל ועוטב, והוליכו שם ספר תורה, מתפללים שם בעשרה, והגיע עתה חג הפסח הקדוש, והסתפקו מעשו יום א' יום טוב לבד כבני ישראל, או יעשו בית ימים טובים של גלויות, כמנהג רוב העולם. והנה בפורים, כבר שאלו מה יעשו בקריאת המגילה. Okay, already now Purim just passed, and they asked what to do on Purim. Right, we're going to say for Torah. והוריתי להם, and I gave them a ruling, שיקראו בית ימים. They should read the Torah both days, the 14th and the 15th. Okay, הראשון בברכה, והשני בלא ברכה.
Does he mean the Megillah itself or the...
I'm talking about Sefer Torah right now. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The Megillah. Okay? So the Megillah, first day they're reading with Beracha, and the second day they're reading the Megillah again without Beracha.
A little weird. Yeah.
Why is it weird? There are a lot of places like that.
If you're in a walled city or not in a walled city.
Well, that's why it's Safek. We're not sure. We don't remember. There were a lot of places.
Walled city?
There were a lot of places like that we come across this. I've come across it many times. So many.
Where they read Sefer Torah without a beracha?
No, not Sefer Torah. Megillah.
Oh,
okay. They'll read it with beracha the first day and without beracha the second day. Okay. וכמו שכתב בספר תיקון יששכר. Okay. בעד עזה. Like I mentioned before from the book תיקון יששכר, right? יששכר בן סוסן. ובלב הכי שנה זאת התרמ"ג. And in any case, this year Hatarmag, in other words, 1883, שכל העולם לא קרינו את המגילה כי אם ביום י"ד לבד, אף אנחנו בני עיר קדושנו ותפארתנו ציון תיבנה ותכונן, היא בית חיינו. Yeah, why? So why did everybody only read on the 14th day? He's telling you in 1883, even the people in Yerushalayim. يعني يوم تدفاف حاليود بيوم شبات كودش, because the 15th fell out on Shabbat. וידוע מנהג עיר הקודש תיבנה ותכונן, כשחל יום תדבב בשבת קודש, שקוראים את המגילה ביום י"ד. Okay? So even in Yerushalayim, if the 15th is the day that they would normally read, but it falls out on Shabbat, and they precede it by a day. They read it on the 14th, like the rest of the world. Okay, and they do the mizvah of matanot le'ebyonim also on the 14th, and it's forbidden for them to work on the 14th. وبيوم شبت قودش אומרים על הניסים בתפילה ובברכת המזון. Okay, but al hanisim, they don't say it on the 14th in the Hamidah, they say it on the 15th, on Shabbat. Umusiim shene sefarim, they take out 2 Sefrei Torah on the 15th on Shabbat, bikorim bashini vayabu amalek, on the second Sefer they read vayabu amalek. Umaftirim pakati, and they do the haftarah of pakati. Umusifim devar ma basauda, and they add something to the sauda to make it sauda not only of Shabbat, but of Shabbat and Purim. וגם עושים מקצת מזוות משלוח מנות. Okay, and they do a little bit in the sense of משלוח מנות. Okay, remember they were all living more or less within the walled city, so they took food to their friend next door. Okay, ומקיימים מזוות משלוח מנות ואין אומרים על הניסים אף בסעודה בברכת המזון כידוע. Okay, ואין אומרים, yeah, and they don't say על הניסים. Okay, they only said al nisim, what do you call it, in the tefillah and berkat mazon, like we said before. ومديه تعمى شلو رحبتي هالديبور بأوتو بيرك. And at the time I didn't speak any more than that. I just told them, okay, do this, so that's it. ואולם عبتا بحاجة pesach. Now we have the pesach is right here. שואלים ודורשים מה יעשה ישראל יום אחד או שני ימים טובים של גלויות. وبفرات كي إسور حماس أبيع عليه إيم شورة الدين نوهيجت لعصود بيت إيمتهم شغاليات. And especially when you get to the end of the holiday, do they have to keep an extra day of holiday, you know, because abstaining from Hamas is a big thing, and we don't want to run into issue of karet. Now, what do? So
who asked the question?
Well, he's saying that Rabbi Salant approached him with this question, but the question really came from the people to Rabbi Salant, and Rabbi Salant is asking him, and it's Ashkenazim and Sephardim together. So what's the answer? Teshoubah. Ra'iti l'Haradbaz. So right away he goes to Radbaz. Okay? Shinish'al al-Ir Azza. Im hayabim b'tirumot u'ma'asot. Right? Do they have to follow tirumot u'ma'asot? يعني شيش أناشيم شيش لهم قرقعات هكذا إم هم خلال إسرائيل أو لا. So the people are people that have land, and now is this considered part of Israel or not? והשיב בשיטות דוודאי דחייבים להפריש תאומות ומסורות הן למען דאמר דחייבים להפריש בישראל דאורייתא הן למען דאמר דחיוב מדרבנן. Okay, whether you want to say it's an issue of the Oraita or it's an issue of the Rabbanan, either way, the Radbaz is saying they must separate Terumot and Ma'asot. בוודאי עולי מצרים כבשוה ואפילו אם אנתם צריך לומר שלא כבשו עולי בבל הרי לא פעלו כמו שעדו את בית שאן וכתב עוזר ואין להביא ראיה ממה שאין עושים שני נתונים של גליות שאין דבר זה תלו בארץ ישראל אלא במקומות שהיו דרים רוב ישראל והיו השילוחים הולכים להם כמו שכתב הרם מהאחרון קידוש החודש שוב מסרתי לבעל כפתור בפרח תלמידו של הרמה שכתב שבעזה בכלל ישראל הוא עד כן לשונו. So the Radbaz was known, he used to give very, very short, concise teshuvot, and he ended the teshuvah by saying, and I looked and I saw in the Kaftor Vafirach was an old Hakham of Israel, Rabbi Ashturai HaParhi, and Rabbi Ashturai HaParhi. You want to see the book?
No,
Okay.
Yeah, two want to see the book.
No problem, I'll get it out. It's not a problem. This Rabbi Ashturai HaParhi wrote that Gaza bichlal Eretz Israel. Gaza is part of Eretz Israel. And that's it. So if you said so, that's it. הרי להדיא דופשט הספק דעזה היא ארץ ישראל וגם פשיט הרי דלה היו עושים בה שני יום טובים של גלויות Okay, because obviously this tells us that this is what Gaza is. It's part of Israel, and there's already a tradition that they do not do 2 days of holiday. מהלך חל אומר של ישראל שהיו עושים יום טוב אחד ואפשר טעמה ומשום שהיו דרים רוב בישראל והיה יישוב לבני ישראל והיה להם קרקעות. Because yes, that's great, but it could be that they did that because it was a steady settlement of Jews and the Jews were living there and they owned, lands and properties and what have you. So yes, technically part of Israel. But now when you have people that are disconnected from the land, they don't own land, they don't have property, you don't have a major settlement of Jews, maybe now the law is different. Because otherwise the teshoubah would end right here, right?
Not a good selling point. Still keeps it please.
Listen, it can be for any place in Israel. Then think about it, the entire West Bank would apply. Okay. Be Yosef Petrani. שגם הוא נשאל על עיר עזה, אי דינה כלישראל לחייב לאשתו לחופה לדור עם בעלה בעזה כתנן הכל מעלין אל ישראל, והשיב הוא תהרב כפתור ופרח סבא לה דהי אל ישראל וראייתו וכו' והוא עושה לאחר כל ראייתם של ישראל. זאת אומרת, זה הלכה that if you want to move to Israel and your wife doesn't want to move, does she have to come with you? If it's you want to move, if it's Israel, technically she has to go. If she doesn't go with you, you divorce her. That's what the halakha is. So the question is, okay, guy wants to move to Gaza. Is that considered part of Israel that she would have to go or not? And they say yes, she has to go. Now that's even harder sell, right? Listen, what can you do? Okay, now wait. מעתו של הרב כתוב הפרח, ודעתו ז"ל, דעזה היא חוץ לארץ, ונסתייעה גם מדברי הירושלמי בחורים, דמוכח מדבריו, דעזה וסור הם חוץ לארץ. So he's comparing Gaza and Sur. Sur is all the way up in Lebanon, okay, Tyre, okay? They're saying these two coastal, and they're both coastal cities, keep in mind. Okay, so these are both considered חוץ לארץ. וכתב עוזר, ופוק חזה, מה עמה דבר, שהרי כל ישראל אשר ישבו שם מעולם, בשנים קדמוניות, מעולם החזיקה כחוץ לארץ. Because go and see what the people that lived there all these years, what did they do? Did they follow 1 day? Did they follow 2 days? They consider Israel? They consider outside Israel? And he's saying, no, everybody considered it like outside. ורבותינו הקדמונים, אשר בירושלים, hazikuha kehus la'aretz, and the Hachamim of Yerushalayim also considered it like hus la'aretz. לעניין תרומות ומעשרות ושביעית, שרוב הפירות והתבואה של ירושלים מביאים לה מעזה, וראיה זו גדולה מבית שאן, לפי שהעידו שבעקיבא אכל עלי ירק בלא מעשר. אוקיי? מעשר, I can't make it, עשרה רבי חוץ לארץ, שהיו נהוגים בה איסור כישראל, והקבלה במעשר הוא עמוד גדול מהוראה. He goes, and basically the Kabbalah and the Ma'aseh, basically tradition and action speaks louder than any sort of ruling, and if that's what the people did, that tells you what they considered. מעתה אין ספק דכיוון דאינה נחשבת אל ישראל לעניין המזוות הנוהגות בה, הרי היא כחוץ לארץ גמורה לכל דברים. And if that's where they treat it for the issue of terumot and ma'asot, and they don't treat it like Israel, then that ruling would apply to everything that we're talking about, and not only to terumot and ma'asot. וכו' כדא אמרינה פרק מי שמוסיו וכו' ועוד עזה לבני מצרים כמו מכרח לעיר. אלא שיחי כל מילי ואין שם רופא. Because anybody that you ask about Gaza, they tell you Gaza is part of Egypt. It's a continuation of Egypt. It's part of that land. הרי היא כחוס לארץ גמורה לכל מיעוטה דמיעוטה לגבי היהודים שבמצרים וכולי. Okay, it's considered as one of the small little communities of the Egyptian Jews. ואופן שלא זכה שר לתשובות הרדב"ז, נזכיר שכתב שיר ישראל. But what? We read the Radbaz in the beginning, and quoted the Radbaz, and the Radbaz was a rabbi in Egypt, and he's saying it's Israel. He didn't say it's part of Egypt. Okay? וחייבים להפריש, and he's saying you have to תרומות ומעשרות. וכי מה לה יראה תשמעיתם מנה לאמור באותו רגע תשובות הרדב"ז, because it seems that, Maharimat obviously was either not familiar with this teshoubah of the Radbaz, or for some reason it skipped his mind and he didn't see it. ואפילו דלה השתמט מנה לאמור, ואולי בראותו כי הרדב"ז הם בלה ורפייה בידיהם, עד שמסר לרב כפתור בפרח, שכתב שעזה היא עיר ישראל, עליו שמח יחידותיו, ועליו הסכמה שהיא עיר ישראל. אם כן, הרב מהרימת, דפליג על דבר הרב כפתור בפרח, ודחה כל ראיותיו, לא הוסרח להביא דברי הרדב"ז, שכל עיקר סמיכתו על דברי הרב כפתור בפרח. Because no, maybe he really did see the Radbaz, but since the Radbaz was relying on the Kaftor Vaferach, and Maharimat is bringing us Kaftor Vaferach, and he's looking at it in a different way, he didn't have to even mention the Radbaz. Da'aka shemi'i begolo harab Maharimat shekol Yisrael asher yashvu sham me'olam v'gam rabbotin wa kadmonim shebirushalayim فحزيكوها كيحوص لأرض لعنيان ترموت معصوت شبيعيت شيمي لو يدعتي ما عيني ولو عود إلا دباليك بمسيئوت لدبرها الربازة بتروه بها مريمات بتولاس because now I have a problem because I don't know what to do. How am I going to answer these people? Because I thought I was going to rely on the Radbaz, but now I see Maharimat. It's telling me not only that it's Haus La'aris, but he's saying that there is a tradition, okay, in words and in action, and not only of the people, but of all the Hakhamim of Yerushalayim for a long time, to treat it that way as Haus La'aris. Well, now what do I go tell these people? I'm in a predicament, I'm telling you. V'chi tomar, ma nafka minna im Azza hi Israel or Haus La'aris. Hello, Radbaz. זה על מעיד בגללו שאין עושים שני יהודים טובים יהיה באיזה טעם שיהיה, אם משום שהיא ישראל וקרובה לירושלים, או משום שהיו השילוחים הולכים להם. Okay? So obviously the way we look at Yom Tov Sheni and what constitutes Yom Tov Sheni or why we do it or not is different than they were looking at it a few hundred years ago. Okay, meaning she's telling you, he's looking at proximity to Yerushalayim. He's looking about if the Shiluhim go there. Okay, and what else did he say over here? Is it Israel? Is it close to Yerushalayim? Is it the Shiluhim that go there? Okay. Do they what?
Do they go there? The Shiluchim?
Now?
Hey, did they go there?
No, they wouldn't go there.
Okay. All right.
I can't see why they would go there. It's possible.
Wasn't it they with the torches on the hills?
The torches on the hills were for the north, as far as I know. Nothing for the south.
That's why there's no hills in the south.
Right.
Once.
Because they were letting the people in Babel know. Going up in the land. They weren't going down south in the land.
Those people.
I'm not saying they don't want to know, but let's see what how he continues this. אם כן, דידן שנשאלנו עליו ופשוט ספקה על כל פנים, דלה יעשו רק יום אחד לבד, כמו שהיו עושים מקדם בזמן ישיבתה. Because maybe we could say ספק, Okay, and since it's technically supposed to be part of Israel, they could just do one day like when it was originally settled. וזאת אשיב, דלאו מלתהי, ולא שמעינן מיניה, נדוננה, כל כמה דלה ידעינן בבירור עיקר טעמם שהיו עושים בזמן הרדב"ז יום אחד לבד, אם באמת היא ברור אסלאם, כי היו השליחים מניעים אסלאם, מגיעים אסלאם. We don't even know if the shlichim would go there. או שמהי מישראל, שכך כתב הרמב"ם ז"ל בהלכות קידוש החודש, פרק ה' הלכה י"א, מקום כבינו ובין ירושלים 10 ימים או פחות, שאפשר שהשלוחים היו מגיעים אליו, רואים עם אותו מקום מישראל שהיו בו ישראל בכיבוש שני, כגון אושה ושפרם וכולי, עושים יום אחד בלבד, ועם אותו מקום מסוריה, כגון סור ודמשק וכולי, או מחוץ לארץ, כגון מצרים וכולי, עושים כמנהג אבותיהם. So all these places he's telling you, you have to just follow the tradition that the people have over there, whether it's to do one day or to do 2 days. Very interesting so far. Wish the print was easier, but anyway. ולא ידברו שהיו מגיעים שלוחים פג'מים. ועתה תחזר להרמב"ם בתשובה בספר פאר הדור, סימן ק"ו, שנשאל על סור שהיו עושים בית ימים טובים של גלויות, אם יש חשש ברכה לבטלה, והשיב דאין בזה ספק ברכה שאין הסליחה, כי כל מקום שיסופק בו, אם היו השלוחים באים או לאו, צריך לעשות שני ימים טובים. Any place that you have a ספק, if the shluchim would come or not, you have to do 2 days of Yom Tov, according to הרמב"ם. ואפשר שהיה מקום קרוב לירושלים, ולא היו השלוחים מגיעים לשם מפני סכנה. And it could be even a place that was close to Yerushalayim, but the shluchim would not come there because of סכנה, because it was dangerous. וכולי. לכן תלוי במנהג. And therefore everything is based upon what was the actual practice. וכולי, יעיין שם. באופן כיסור שהיא אחת מערי סוריה, כמו שכתב בחיבורו חזקאל לעיל, שהולכים בה אחר המנהג אבותיהם, כתב תשובותיו ונזכר שהטעם הוא משום ספקה אם היו מגיעים השלוחים או לא. דומיני, now let's how do we judge for our case? דומיני לנודנידן לעיר עזה, ולדעת הרב כפתור ופרח והרדב"ז ז"ל, דהי ארץ ישראל, אם היו עושים יום אחד כדין היו עושים יען היא קרובה לערי קודש ירושלים תיבנה ותכונן, אף אם לא היו מגיעים השלוחים או לא. ודברי הרב מהרימה ז"ל סביר עליה דהי חוץ לארץ, בהכרח נאמר למה שהיו עושים יום אחד, הגם שלא ידענו בבירור אם היו מגיעים אליהם השלוחים ומטעם מנהג שכן נהגו אבותיהם, כמו שכתב הרמב"ם. So again, it all depends upon what was the actual practice of the people. אם כן, אחר שיש 60 או 70 שנה שנתבטל היישוב ונתבטל מנהגם, ועתה ישבו מחדש בעיר עזה, איך נאמר להם שלא יעשו רק יום אחד ויאכלו חמץ ביום השמיני ויעשו מלאכה, מאחר דנקראת עיר חדשה לשבע עתה. And now, since we lost all tradition, and it's a city that there hasn't been a Jewish settlement for 60, 70 years, what do we do when we get to the end of the holiday? You know, is it we consider it a new city that they're now settling? Do we consider an old city that they're resettling? What do we do with it? ובשלמה, אם היה ברור לנו שעזה היא ארץ ישראל, או היה ברור לנו שהיו מגיעים אליהם השליחים, הוודאי גם עתה היינו פוסקים להם שיעשו יום אחד. If we knew for sure, then we just give them a clear answer, to just do 1 day. Okay, ברם, עינינו הרואות שהרדב"ז עצמו מספק לטעמה, מה היו עושים יום אחד, הוודאי אם מטעם נכון הוא, אם מטעם מנהג נהגו כן. ועתה שבטל היישוב זה כמה וכמה שנים, אינו צודק לומר להם שיעשו יום אחד ליבה, שעיקר מנהגם לא היה מפאת האיש שהיה ראוי לכל הדר בה לעשות יום אחד כשאר ארץ הקודש, אלא מטעם מנהג, בכל שנתבטל היישוב נתבטל המנהג. Now, anytime that you have the yishuv, the settlement of Jews of that city, stopped, the minhag stopped. Okay? Now we can get rid of all the minhag of Halab and Sham and everything else too.
Right.
Okay?
Once it stops, you stop it. There's
Right.
a certain amount of time? Is it
Because there's no more, because everything's gone. Because once the Jews aren't living there, the minhag of that place no longer exists. Even if you're going back to that place,
So,
it no longer exists.
something like halab is gone.
Right, technically, onto this. Exactly, whatever that means, exactly. ואתה תחזה בנווה היפה, שהיא יותר קרובה מארץ עזה. Okay, I don't know where this place is. Anybody know? בנווה היפה. No? Anybody? Somebody? Anyways, seems to be like a new place. Okay? And he's saying that it's closer than Gaza. V'hi Israel, v'hayu darim ba Yisrael, v'kama amuraim b'zman bait sheni, kigon Rabbi Abba demen Yafo, Rabbi Hiya bar Yehuda me Yafo, Rabbi Adda demen Yafo, Rabbi Nehemiah demen Yafo, וכתוב מוכח בספר בן גוריון, כמו שכתב הרב ברכי יוסף ז"ל, בחלק אור החיים סימן תעשו, עוד ט. על כל זה כתב הרב פרי האדמה בחלק ג' דף כ"א עמוד ג', שצריכים לעשות בית ימים טובים של גלויות, יעיין שם. וואו. ואחיו הרב שדה הארץ בחלק ג' בחלק אור החיים סימן כ"ו נשאל באיש אחד שבא מקושטא וקבע דירתו ביפו, וכתב שאם גמר בדעתו לקבוע דירתו ביפו, שלא יעשה רק יום אחד, יען שהיא ארץ ישראל, מלא זכר שר דברי הרב מור אחיו ז"ל, או לא... Interesting, one second. נווה היפה, so נווה היפה, he just, what do you call it, just, he's talking about Yafo. Okay.
Rabbi Ohana was the first five Zoltech rabbi you
Yes.
went with us?
Yes.
He translated the Gemara
Into Hebrew.
That's why I remember him.
Yes, that's him. I have a couple of them inside.
They're on eBay.
Are they? Okay.
$9.99 plus $3.99 shipping.
Not the original. That's cheap.
I don't know.
All right, later. Yeah, she's לא זכה שר דברי הרב מור אחיו ז"ל הנשאל לדבריו מעתה ונתן שהייתה חדשה לשבע עתה וכתב שלא ראינו ולא שמענו שהיה יישוב ישראל ביפו. Okay, so what Rabbi Elyashar is telling us now, he goes, people are now moving to Yafo. Okay, he goes, but Jews didn't live in Yafo. But we haven't had Jewish settlement in Yafo. Okay, and there's a difference of opinion. Now that a guy moves to Yafo, do we tell him to do 1 day, or we tell him to do 2 days? So he brought one rabbi, okay, he brought the Periha Adama. Periha Adama is saying to do 2 days of Yom Tov in Yafo. And the Periha Adama's brother, the Sedeh Ha'aris, okay, is saying to do 1 day. Now this guy moved from Kushta. In other words, the guy moved from Istanbul to Yafo. And he came to ask, what do I do? He had to have asked Sedeh Ha'aris, and Sedeh Ha'aris says, well, if your intention is to stay here and not go back to Istanbul, do 1 day. Okay, so but now Rabbi Elyashar is saying, but we don't have a tradition of a Jewish settlement over here. How's he telling him to do 1 day over here, based upon what? השיג לעשה יום אחד כבן ישראל, יעין שם באורך, בכל דבר ז"ל. min hamatmihin, because it really goes, I'm in bewilderment. I don't understand where he's coming from. في كوسة عن يدعتي ككبار مليتين ودمولا شاي يشوب يسرائيل بيافو بزمان بايد شني. Yes, there was a Yishub, there was a Jewish settlement in Yafo in the days of Bayit Sheni. Okay, but it hasn't been since. ואין כאן מקום להעריך. מעיין בסדר של מי חגיגה, דפרה לחם ואלף שכתב, אחר שהביא עדות הגאון הרב חידה, שהעיד שביפו לא עשו רק יום אחד בזמן הרב זרע אברהם והרב בתי כהונה. So the Shalmei Hagiga, in other words, the Shalmei Sibur, brings testimony from the Hida in his Birkei Yosef that, well, not necessarily the Birkei Yosef, but from the Hida, that he gave testimony that in Yafo they would only do one day of holiday based upon the Zera Abraham and the Beti Kehuna. וכולי. כתב הוסל בלשונו, וכל זה מורה שכת הקדמונים ידעו שהיו השילוחים מגיעים ליפו. That's because obviously the earlier Hachanim knew that the Shiluchim would make it to Yafo. ולא ידעתי מהיכן הכריח דזה, אף אם לא היו מגיעים השילוחים ליפו, מוכרח לעשות יום אחד אם היא אל ישראל בקרובה לירושלים. Well, who cares if the Shiluchim came there or not, if there is a tradition that they do one day over there and it's close to Yerushalayim. So it seems all these Hachamim are not understanding one another. That's what I'm getting so far as to how they're coming up with their
I mean, does Harambam talk about like
Haramam talks about all of this, yes.
read about like when you would hold one day versus 2 days, what's his barometer like in terms of, I mean, here they're saying, okay, just because it was before doesn't mean it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Is his position like that also?
Harambam seems to be talking about, main thing, he talks about distance and he talks about settlement. As far as I know, those are the two parameters that he has. I don't know if he talks about Shalichim.
Right, some of these people are bringing in, well, okay, now you don't have people there, so then it doesn't count anymore.
Right. If you don't have a settlement, then you don't have a tradition, then you lose a tradition.
Sounds like a whole new way of deciding.
Well, if there's no people there, how do you have a tradition? Especially we're talking about much longer periods of time.
Right.
If we're talking about the city of Yafo, for example, okay, yes, there was a Jewish settlement over there 2,000 years ago. For a period of close to maybe 1,000 years, there was no Jewish settlement there. Now all of a sudden people move there. You don't have a tradition as to what they did and what they didn't do. How do you determine that?
Got it.
All right, let's try to finish this up though. איך שיהיה, מסענו ראינו להרב פרי האדמה, ואפילו ביפו, שהיא יותר קרובה מעזה, ועל הרוב היו עושים יום אחד, ועל כל זה, כיוון שנבטל היישוב בספקה מספר זה, אם היו מגיעים שילוחים וגזר עומס שיעשו בית ימים מאו מפני סביר עליה, שדיחוס לארץ, והרב שדה הארץ דן אותה כעיד חדשה, ודאי כי לא נעלה מעיני דמור, שהיה יישוב קדום ביפו, אלא כיוון שנבטל היישוב, כל כך זמן, קרא לה עיר חדשה, ומנה אנו דנים לעיר עזה בפלוגתה מתניה. Okay, so you're saying, since, see Jason, once, there hasn't been a settlement there for an extended period of time, and now people come to settle there, it's considered like a completely new city and a new settlement. And that's what we have to determine if it's considered part of Israel or as part of Hus La'aretz. באים בספר נאום ולקסייה, מה שהרבה לבואה על הרב מורימה והריבה והריח כל מוסו במקום שראו לקסה לא היה שם, מספקה עליהם היו מגיעים שלוחים מולה, וגם זה וכמה שנים הם בתי היישוב בני ישראל, בטלו כל המנהגים והרי עזה כעיר חדשה ממש. And the city of Gaza, according to other sources, is definitely considered a new city, a new settlement. ובכן, זאת עלתה הסכמתי לפי כושר עניות דעתי ומיעוט השגתי ואלו הראשונים שישבו בעזה, אם הם מעיר הקודש ירושלים, אתם יודעים כנראה, או מאחד מארבע ערשי הקודש, שנוהגים לעשות יום אחד, יעשו כאשר היו עושים במקום שיעשו משם יום אחד לבד. So now now he's saying, this is a very odd response for, to conclude this teshoubah. He seems that he is not 100% clear as to what they really should do. So he's saying, since the people that are moving into Gaza, if these people are originally from Yerushalayim or from one of the four cities, okay, we know the four cities of Israel are Yerushalayim, Hebron, Tiberiah, and Safed, okay? So I don't know why he says four cities, but I guess he meant all four of them, including Yerushalayim, which we already mentioned separately. And in all these four cities, the custom is to do 1 day only. So even though they're moving out of one of those four cities and they're moving into Gaza, they continue to do 1 day. مش كتاب بري آدم بدين من هجي السورة وديوتاش بيها هيدرا القادم أمر بفعل بنخشته شلو بخلك كناك بنتنا زي أنا جي مشين بعير حدا شاء برخينا ذي حزين ما أخاك أمر مشين بكيوتا بخاد بوها الأشباه زاد بهران من تفريق بينهم ما أخاك توك الأمر بينهاجوك منهاج أوتوم مكون شباو مشام. They follow the manhag of the place that they came. شمعينان دخول عير حداشا إبن داع روب أناشي ميخن باو. Anytime you have a new city, if you know where the majority of the people that are coming to this city are from, hakol ya'asu keminhag oto makom sheba'u misham. Okay, they all should do like the city that they came from. So now back to what we said about, okay, let's say Halab's gone. Let's say the majority of the people now came from there, so they could keep doing what? I'm saying that's how he's looking at it now. Sheba'u misham v'chatav huzal da'af im ba'u mirubim. Now let's say a lot of people came, okay, but the original people that came to the city are now what do you call it, a much smaller percentage. You have to follow the first settlers, okay. So let's say you originally had for example, the year 1900, you had 20 people that came from Shem, okay, and now you have 10 years later, 100 people came from Halab. The Halabi have to follow the Shamis because the Shamis originally established, what the custom is and what the practice is. All hypothetical, obviously. And you have to follow whether it's dealing with a stringency or with a leniency. This is based upon Maran in Abkat Rochel, in Teshubot. شيريخ الحيل لمعانيته بروح بناته من قام هراب حرقبوها بيده وهراب بيحلقوا رحيم بخيها المهاجيم ويتمهن شلوه زخلو سنين من في عمارة وقال وسيلة فيها بداحات بقريم يمات السلام بخشوم من لبرها يورا كنشيم تيت وباو حركة عصرها ازاي ان قريم عصرها حارة حميشة تشعة إلا تشعة قريم حارة من let's say you only had 9 that came, you didn't have minyan, and a 10th guy came, he gets to to settle the score and and overrule all of them, because without him they would have never been minyan. So now he's concluding. This is the deen for our case. If the 10 first people are from Bnei Israel, they should follow like the minhag of Israel. But if the first 10 people were from Hus La'aris, they have to follow the practice like they did outside of Israel. Anybody who comes afterwards must follow what they do based upon Hus La'aris. Even if they're 100 to 10. And that's it. And that's where he ends it. So obviously, you see, he had a lot of questions and he was unsure. And even though with all the settlements that existed in Gaza, in the end, they weren't sure as to what the tradition was. 60, 70 years of no settlement there, everything was forgotten. You know, you would think that somebody would be around to remember, this is what we did. They didn't have that. Okay, all of a sudden, things just completely changed. So now you know, if you want to have a place in Israel, you want to start a new settlement, don't start with a bunch of people from Brooklyn. No, seriously, you have to start it with people from, preferably from one of the 4 Arasot. You know? Anyway, so there was definitely a community in Gaza, and even when they reestablished the community, and was considered, according to Halakha, a new community, it became more a permanent settlement. And now let's see what's going to happen now. If there's, you know, once they clean up over there, if they're going to turn it into a new settlement again, or they're going to give it to people who once again want to get rid of us. Scary. It's very scary.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Joey.
you joining us.
Thank
Take
you
care.
for having us again.
My pleasure. Take care. Good night.
What was on?